Hi, I'm Mike Gross, and this is Nittany Next. And this week it's literally going to be almost entirely about what's next because Penn State heads to Iowa Saturday for a game between the number 3 and 4 teams in the country, a game that could not only be season defining for both teams, but figures to impact the Big Ten Conference and the national picture. The Hawkeyes are 5-0, including decisive wins over Indiana, rival Iowa State, and Maryland last week, and they've done it with special teams, defense, and an uncanny ability to force and benefit from turnovers. Iowa's intercepted 12 passes in 5 games. They forced 16 turnovers overall, and they have an insane plus 12 turnovers through 5 games. All of those figures lead the country. Last week against Maryland, they benefited from 7 turnovers, including 6 interceptions from 6 different players. And the average field position on which they started their drives in that game was essentially midfield, the 47-yard line. So I think the easy, obvious take on this game is that Penn State has to hold on to the ball, which they've been pretty good at, to have a chance. And Iowa is a slight favorite. I'm going to argue that that's close to, but not exactly the right take. According to the NCAA's total offense stat, which is really yards per game, Iowa's offense is the worst in the Big Ten and 119th in the country. You might be thinking, well, that's got to be deceptive because of all those turnovers and all the great special teams. They've had great field position all the time. They've had short fields all the time. So they haven't had to rack up a lot of yards to score a lot of points. And to an extent, that's true, but not to the extent that I expected when I started looking at this. Iowa is 114th in the country and last in the Big Ten in yards per play. Those of us who follow Penn State would probably all agree that it's one glaring weakness so far this year, is that it's been terrible at running the ball. I certainly think that it's been terrible at running the ball. It has been. But Penn State has run the ball better than Iowa, both per game and per attempt. That's not about field position. In the Indiana game, season opener, Iowa had 303 yards. By modern standards, a pretty modest number, less than 5 yards per rush, and an anemic 5.2 yards per pass. But they had 2 long interception returns for touchdowns. And they not only won, they won 34-6 against arch rival Iowa State the following week. And at this point, Iowa State was a top 10 team. Iowa was badly outgained, ran for 1.7 yards per attempt, but they had a fumble return for a touchdown and won by 10. The following week, they got only 1 turnover. Okay, the turnovers were not a factor in that game. Again, less than 300 yards of total offense for the second straight week, 1.7 yards per rush for the second straight week, and they trailed at halftime and struggled to win against Colorado State. Even in the Maryland game last week, which was a 51-14 blowout, the Hawkeyes trailed at halftime before the Terps started to just throw it to the wrong team every time they got the ball. I remember I said a couple minutes ago that Penn State has to hold on to the ball to have a chance. That idea is close to, but not exactly the right take. I think the reality of this is that Iowa has to create turnovers, has to win that phase of it decisively to have a chance. Look, this is a good team. Iowa is really well coached by Kirk Ferentz and his staff. They've been playing this style and winning it with it for a long time. And this team is pretty clearly more talented than the average Iowa team. But the truth is that the biggest unit mismatch in this game, by far, is Iowa's offense against Penn State's defense. And I think that mismatch is very, very greatly in Penn State's favor. Now, like everyone else on earth, I don't know what's going to happen. But the closer I look at this, the more I'm convinced that Penn State has more ways to win than Iowa does. So there you have it. It's a 4:00 kick Saturday afternoon at Kinnick Stadium in fabulous Iowa City. With the college football world watching, I'll be watching too, and I'll be writing about what I see. So check out our Penn State coverage this week and throughout the season at LNP LancasterOnline.com. I'm Mike Gross. This has been Nittany Next, and we will see you next week.